All right, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to our Innate Superpowers, the show where we try to help each and every one of us become better people slowly and incrementally. My name is Tracy.
My name's Shaq.
And for today's topic, I wanted to talk about education. I don't know about you guys, but I just wrapped up my finals for the semester, and I'm feeling a little, I don't know, reflective. Is that the right word for it? I just feel like I've been going down memory lane and thinking about my educational journey from where I started to where I am right now and how that's changed immensely. Sometimes I forget that I'm Asian American until I, really think about the fact that, like, oh, I'm Asian, and there's certain implications that go in with that. And sometimes I think about what that means as far as education goes. If you guys watched my introductory video, I touched a little bit on the fact that, and as a first-gen Asian American, I feel like there's a lot of pressures that are constantly pitted on us. In order to do well in life, you have to go to college and get a degree, and that's the only way to success. And I, for one, want to challenge that notion and try to destigmatize the idea of not having to go to college in order to be successful. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about education from the perspective of, an African American, and kind of give us a little bit of insight on the same situation. What kind of implications does that have on the African American community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like education is a really kind of not as highly touched upon part of the African American experience. Like, you have some communities. I mean, it's pretty diverse, where within the black community, you have some people that are highly like, education's the way to go, there's no other way, and then you have a large majority also that are like, you know what, like, you don't need school, like, you need to do whatever it takes just to put food on the table and to put a roof over your head. And I think that's the narrative we tend to hear more often than not. But I want to start by saying both narratives do exist, but I'll speak more on to what I've seen from my friends and from my community at large, which is that, you have a lot of people that say, hey, well, education's not that important once you get, like, say, your high school diploma, for example. And I go back and forth with this all the time. I mean, I strongly believe that education is important, but I believe I understand where that narrative comes from of like, oh, well, after you get your diploma, you just need a roof over your head and food on the table. And the reason why I understand that is because there's a lot more pressures than just how many accolades can you get, right? How many awards, how many degrees, and how many kind of titles can you obtain. That isn't as important, especially in my community, when you're facing things like trying to figure out where you're going to lay your head, what food you're going to put in your tummy, how you're going to, carve your path in this world, especially in America, as a person of color. And so I get both narratives, but I definitely see that kind of, oh, well, you just need to do basically the bare minimum, right? Like, just go get your high school diploma and then you can stop. I see that quite often, and it's alarming. So I think that's a kind of topic that it goes so deep that it's a very case by case basis, and depending on where you're from and what you're doing, I definitely understand, say a parent saying, hey, well, you just got to do what you got to do to survive.
Right.
Versus, hey, go to the school, rack up, $100,000 of debt, and good luck.
Right, which is, I feel, the complete opposite from the narrative that I and a lot of other Asian Americans that I've talked to are used to. I will acknowledge before I continue on with my train of thought that it has an amount of privilege behind it that, you know, you would be foolish not to acknowledge how much privilege Asian Americans really do have, at least in this situation, where survival in the context that you're talking about is a given almost, because the expectation for young Asian American students is that don't worry about a roof over your head, don't worry about where your next meal is coming from. Your only focus should be school. And for me, I feel like I can speak on my own experience, and it's interesting because when I reflect on it, it's hard not to feel this kind of guilt. I don't know if anyone else has dealt with this before, but this amount of guilt that, like, I don't have to worry about these things, and the only thing that I have to worry about is school. So I shouldn't feel guilty about, you know, that's the only thing I have to worry about. There's so much more out there that other people are dealing with. But I think as I've gotten older, I kind of realized that my struggles and trials and tribulations are still valid no matter what, because there is this culture that we're constantly trying to one up each other in how much we struggle. And I think that's completely wrong. Everyone's struggle is valid. And it's not a competition as who has it worse. We should all be trying to focus on how can we get each other into a better position, no matter if you are Black or Asian or white or Hispanic. You know, it shouldn't be a matter of like, well, you shouldn't feel this way because at least you have a place to live, you know, because that's not productive. It doesn't help us get to the next step in our society. And so when I think about the struggle that I'm referencing, it's the struggle that I was raised with, the idea education can only be obtained through a college degree. And if you don't go to college, then your entire existence is almost invalid, and that you're never going to be successful. You're never going to have a good job. And I get where that comes from. There's a genuine concern with your parents wanting you to do better than they did, right? A lot of the time when immigrants come to America, it's not like they have a very prestigious background. They're trying to create something that is really different for their children. But I feel like with that, there's a lot of pressure for their children to do extraordinarily well. And they don't get that opportunity to develop their sense of self and to truly figure out what they want to do in life, which I would argue is worse than finding a very lucrative career that may make you a lot of money, but if you're miserable in it, then you're just going to end up feeling like you did it for nothing because you don't feel that sense of fulfillment within yourself.
Yeah, we talk about these type of things all the time, and I feel like there's a lot of like pros and cons to everything, right? I feel like you get certain things from doing things one way, and then you get certain things from doing things another way. And what I mean by that is, like, you talk about a sense of self, and in the African American community, I feel like you see most people of color in that realm, just they have a strong sense of self. They know exactly who they are, but then they struggle to try and, you know, better themselves using like education, for example, or they struggle to carve their own way with education being a means of opening doors for them. Right. And like, so I think there's a lot of pros and cons to both sides. And I think that I definitely agree. Everyone's struggle is definitely valid. I think we are all trying to elevate. And I think that we just all face our own challenges while trying to elevate together.
Absolutely.
And so I think, you know, it's very important to kind of pay attention to like really what you're looking to gain out of your experience, like your journey in life, right? Because education is great, right? People would argue I'm highly educated, you know, and yourself included. And at the same time, we're still also like, well, you know, we know who we are, but like, how can we strengthen that? How can we, you know, we still have the same common struggles, the same common crises that we all face, right? Like, and I think that no matter the amount of education or lack thereof, you still face the same things. Now the degree is different, but
yes,
I think that, I mean, it's the human experience is, it's unique, like it's uniquely you, but there are some overarching themes that I think we all encounter, and education does play a big part in those themes and how we progress through our journey, you know.
mm-hmm.
How quickly you rise to, you know, wealth, or how capable you are to obtain social clout, for example, right? Like, I think that in a way education always plays a part in those,
yes,
in those kind of those fields, you know, or those kind of categories through that you encounter through life. So I mean, my personal opinion, I've told you this before, and I mean, talking to you kind of changes my mind about it, but I grew up like in a very, very similar situation to what you're saying, like where education was like a given. Like, I knew I was going to college. Like,
right.
from, I kid you not, from like first grade, second grade.
Well, going to college without having to worry about paying rent on time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff like
No,
that.
never
Mm-hmm.
had to worry about any of that stuff. You know, I had friends that were like that, but I didn't have to face that. So I got a chance to kind of like live through them, but at the same time, I got to go home to, I mean, I always lived in apartments and stuff, but I got to go home to a roof over my head, food on the table, never questioned and where any of that would come from.
Mm-hmm.
And from the beginning, my family always was like, you're going to college. So
Yeah.
I come from a very privileged background in that I knew. Like, when I got accepted to college, I was just like it wasn't an accomplishment to me. And people had to remind me, like, dude, like, first of all, being a young black man and to make it into college, you're a fraction of a percent.
Right.
You know, and then to continue on to higher education past that, you know, you're really doing something. There's people that are watching you. And I was like, oh, okay. I realized, but it was a given. I don't feel that's how that goes for most people that I've associated with throughout my lifetime. Most of them, especially black men, didn't make it as far educationally, right? A lot of black women did, I will say that. But a lot of like young men that I started out with have either died, have gone to jail, or if they didn't just drop out of high school, they made it, and then they kind of like never heard from them again. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll see them here and there, like very rarely, and I'll be like, every time I see them, I'm like, I don't even want to say what's up, because you could tell life has not been
Favorable.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting hearing that perspective from you, because I feel like it's very seldom you hear about Asians not making it to some extent. Like, even if they fail, it's still relatively successful.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of, they want to do the absolute best that they can, which you should. But I think that the issue is that when you have so much pressure to do well, that it supersedes, I hope I'm using that word the right way, your own ability to be uniquely you and to have your own journey. I think that's where the danger is. And what I'm referencing is my own kind of journey throughout school, because I don't know if there are any like young people in high school right now who are really hell-bent on like going to college and are kind of unsure about it, but just know that there are other options for you out there. And college is absolutely not for everybody. You have to make your journey yours. Your life, your career, your goals are strictly yours. You should claim them for yourself. They're not going to be your parents. They're not going to be your peers. They're not going to be anyone else but yours. And I wish I had understood that lesson when I was younger, because for a long, long time, I let my journey in education define who I was but that was it. So everything outside of education, I felt like I didn't really have a place in. And it didn't really magnify itself until I got accepted into Sac State. And that was the first time I just absolutely crumbled under that pressure, because I didn't have a strong sense of self. And then for the first time in my life, I felt like, okay, well, there's all these options, but I have no idea what to do. I just know I have to succeed. But how can you succeed if there's no goal to measure your success by? So there was a lot on my plate because it felt like there was no goal for me. But I kind of realized early on that me going to Sac State, me going to a 4-year immediately, was never my intention. It was always my parents' intention. And probably if I got into like a UC or like a private school, probably would have went there, but had a very similar situation. And, you know, I mentioned this in the previous video, but I went through a semester and I did so poorly that I ended up dropping out. And I'm not proud of that moment, but again, it was extremely pivotal for me to understand that nothing in my life matters if I don't actually have a passion to go along with it. If I don't actually want that goal for myself, it's not worth pursuing, because eventually it's going to catch up with you. And I'm happy that it happened so early on in my life, when risk doesn't affect me the same way as if I had a family, for example. But just know that if you are ever questioning, you know, should you go to college, think about your reasons for going to college. Is it really for you and to fulfill your own dreams? Or is it because you feel like you have to do it to fulfill someone else's dreams? Which sounds really cliche, but it's not something that we talk about enough in minority culture, because it's almost like that's the expectation. For you to do well, you have to go to college, you have to have a degree. And now having a bachelor's degree is somewhat like having a high school diploma, in which everyone has one. It's not as special. So what's next? It's always going to ramp up in intensity. Now you see a lot more people pursuing their master's program, but not because they want to, but because these jobs recognize everyone has a bachelor's. You're not special. So now you need something to differentiate yourself from everybody else. So you have to make sure that that path that you want to pursue, like I said, is really only for you.
One thing that I think is very poignant that you talk about is that you have to choose something. Everyone always says choose the stuff that you love, choose your passions, and that can be tough. Like, you know, if you have a poor sense of self, if you get somewhere and you just feel completely out of place, like I feel like that happens a lot with you know, black people especially when they get to college. It's not that they're dumb, it's not that they're incapable, it's just that they just don't feel like this institution was built for them to be a part of, which they're right. But you have to be that trailblazer. You have to be that person that's like I mean, you kind of know my attitude towards a lot of things is, for lack of a better term, F it. Like, when I get to a certain group of people and I'm like, oh, like, not only do I recognize that I don't belong here, quote unquote, but like, they don't want me here. I go, well, I could just leave. I could just crumble. I could be like, man, like, why? I gotta make them like me. Instead, I'm just like, I don't care. Because, you know, and I hit people with this real quick. I don't care, because who are you to me anyway? Mm-hmm. Most people, unfortunately, I know this sounds really sad, but most people you'll never run across again in your life. So who are they?
Use that to your advantage. People get so in their heads about, well, I can't do this thing because it's going to embarrass me, or, well, I can't do this thing because I don't know anyone.
Right. Or no one looks like me.
And it's like, who cares? Right. And I mean that in the best way possible. No one cares, because if you don't want to be there again, you don't have to be there again, but you're there now. Right. You might as well make the most out of everything that you have. And so, you know, I wish that was a piece of advice I gave my younger self, which, you know, was, even if you don't understand something right now, let's say for a particular class, you paid to be there. you want to be there. You might as well utilize all your resources right now, because the worst that could happen is you end up in the exact place that you started, which, if that's the case, then who gives a damn?
What was the risk in the first place?
Right.
Right? Like, that's how I felt. I took organic chemistry. It's known to be one of the hardest courses that you can take. For some people love it, but I mean, by and large, I hear most people like, oh my God, it's that big scary class.
Mm-hmm.
I took it and I passed the first time, but it was funny because when I came in, I had that attitude. Like, I was just like, I'm paying money. Like, honestly, professor, love you, but you work for me. Like,
right.
When you have office hours, you're there for me. Like, whenever I send an email to you, I expect an email in return. But I mean that with all due respect. I'm just saying that was the attitude I had to have, because if not, I could easily get lost in, like, I'm literally the only person of color in my organic chemistry class.
Mm-hmm.
No other person at the moment has made it to this point. You know, there may have been others, but, you know, there's one a semester, two a semester, or something like that.
Right.
But, like, I had to just go heart and shell and just go, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, oh, no one looks like me. Well, I look like me. And someone else will see that and they'll come along and then they look like themselves, and someone else will see it, you know, and then eventually you build kind of this culture of like, oh, wait, there are some people, there's not large, but at least there's some. And that's how you kind of start this, make this movement happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that, you know, to tie it back to what we were talking about before, education is a luxury, and you said that. But with the passion, you have to pursue the stuff that you really want, because, like, with a passion, because at the end of the day, if you were going to succeed in something, why not let it be something that you really like and enjoy? Right? Why succeed? Like, I'm not saying I hate this completely, but I am not a fan.
Grinds your gears.
Yeah, of like succeeding at something that I never wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it kind of is like,
yeah.
I don't know. Ta-da! You succeed. You're the best in, you know, this thing that you were like never even wanting to be a part of. Yes, you put your best foot forward. That's great. Cool. People know that you're good at this thing, but I'd much rather be in, you know, this other part of my life. I'd rather be, you know, doing these other things. And I think that's important because you just don't hear that enough, right? People that have that attitude and that are like, yo, I'm going to just do it because I said so. Just because I feel like it. And you only hear it, especially in the black community, when people are like, I'm gonna be an athlete. Great, that's cool. My nephew literally just said he wanted to be an athlete like 3 weeks ago,
and he's young. He's 11, right?
But see, they learn, especially in the black community, they learn to do it with like sports or music.
Mm-hmm.
But I see such a huge gap in that same attitude towards school. And I tutor, and even in tutoring, I don't hear that same attitude. But it's amazing. Like, if you take that attitude, say you want to do sports, that's great. But say you take that and you turn that towards, you know, pursuing whatever, you know, passion you have. If you want to be an actor, or if you want to be, you know, a scientist, or you want to be some media mogul. It doesn't matter. I mean, just things that are just not as, I hate to say it, but not as cliche, right? Like, it's like cliche, like me having Asian friends or having you in my life, right? And it'd be like you being like, I want to be a doctor. I'd be like, I mean, that's great, but is that really what you want to do? It just seems kind of cliche, right? Or me being like, coming to you and be like, I want to be a rapper. Nothing wrong with that, but like, I would expect you to be like, is that really?
Be like,
if that's what you're really passionate about.
Never heard you rap before.
Sure, exactly. Throw something else out there
Hours a week.
Hey, you know, throw something else out there that, you know, is throw something out there that'll catch you by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is totally off topic, but like, it was one of my favorite moments the time before last I was with my nephew, when I said, what did I say? How you gonna get to work or something like that? And he was like, a hot air balloon. and I mean, this young man is not like a toddler, but you have to have that type of like without hesitation. Hot air balloon. What? Like,
I'll figure it out. It's really the principle behind it. Then he also acknowledged that it's difficult because it depends on the weather. So I was like, you know what? Kudos to you for being able to factor all that in at the age of 11.
Right. But I mean, having that type of like determination. Drive. Yeah. To where you're like, this seems completely bonkers. But so does, back in the day, so does building electric cars. So does, kind of having complete online platforms. I mean, these things were just unheard of until they manifested themselves. and then now we praise those people. And not all of those people were super, education heavy. If that, I don't know a better way to put it at the moment.
They weren't to put it in like casual terms, they weren't book smart to the T. Right. They were just people that had a dream and then followed their dream out.
Yeah.
And that is really important because you have to think outside the box sometimes. Like, it's cool if you want to just follow the status quo, but I would argue a lot of young people are always trying to find ways to break out of that and to make a name for themselves.
But not so much, sorry to cut you off, but not so much in minority communities.
No.
Unless it's the cliche, like basketball or the I want to be a singer type of deal, which completely valid passions, don't mean to diss anybody.
Or like for Asian people, it's being a doctor or being a lawyer. And right. I know those are cliches, and we're getting somewhat closer to getting out of that. But it's definitely not enough.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, I couldn't help but think, a lot of Asian American people that I've met have that drive and determination, but purely for education and nothing beyond that.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine for both groups of people that we're talking about how much further we would get as a society, but more importantly, how much further these individuals would get in their own lives if they funneled that passion for something into just reinvesting in themselves and finding out something that they really like to do and pushing forward in that.
I think what I see and what you're saying is that you always have to push outside of your box, outside of your comfort level.
Yes, or what you know to be true.
Right, because like in the Asian American community, you have, education's everything, but then a lot of them get lost in just doing this one thing, and may end up unhappy in doing so. And in the African American community, you have like strong sense of self, but then kind of limiting themselves in, certain pursuits because they don't have the, quote unquote qualifications. Like the certain hoops you just have to jump. You can't be a doctor if you don't go to school, right?
Right.
You can't go do this certain thing unless you have these certain credentials. And I think the only way, either way, is to kind of push outside of your comfort zone so that you can discover who and what you truly want. Like who you really are and what you truly are trying to achieve, right? Like I have a friend a long time ago, Asian American, great guy. I told you the story once. Mad quiet. Like, I mean, I knew the guy for years, and I kid you not, we had conversations, but we probably in total had like, I don't know, I'd say less than 10 conversations, and I really liked him. He was around me, I was around him, but he just didn't talk very much.
Mm-hmm.
He'd listen, or he'd laugh, but that was it, or he'll give you a nod, like he wouldn't...
Like he would just acknowledge that you spoke to him.
Yeah, and like... It was funny because when we went to graduate high school, he was like, he stood up because, the teacher one day was like, everyone kind of give your last words to your cohort and what you want and what you'll be and all this stuff. And it was a beautiful moment. But he got up and he was like, I want to be a comedian. And I was like, what? Like, first of all, I mean, this is before, you know, all of the phenomenal comedians that are Asian American now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was, okay, I mean, I'm not super old, but this was definitely more than 10 years ago, you know, and he was like, I want to be a comedian, and we were just blown away. Like, nobody heard this guy talk more than just, you know, the small pieces here and there, and for him to just get up and full confidence be like, comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what? Like, the Asian kid, no disrespect, but the Asian kid, well-mannered, well put together, you want to be a comedian? Like, and he was just like, yeah. And we were just like...
And it's beautiful.
Okay. And that was so cool. That moment was like... You can tell it wasn't like... That wasn't his natural go-to. You could tell it wasn't like... He's like, yeah, my whole life I've been just spitting jokes. Like, but you could tell it was something like... That was already on his heart. Like, he was already just like... I think, like, this is what I want to do. And I think that's important, is to get outside of the box that everyone places you in, and sometimes you place yourself in it, in that box as well. To get outside of that and be like, what is it that I'm really pushing for? Because it doesn't have to be education, because a lot of times, and not to drone on, there was something that you had said earlier, which was that there's always like some new level that you're pushing for.
Mm-hmm.
Got the first degree. Okay, cool. Got it. And then I was like, well, like, I mean, I'm a driven guy, and I was doing other things and doing medical programs and things like that. And that was great. But at the same time, there's more. There's still things I needed to do. There's still like things that I felt in my heart I wanted to accomplish outside of just these programs. And then I was like, wait.
For reference, you're someone who is on the pre-med route. You got your degree in business, your bachelor's in business, and now you're currently pursuing your master's in business administration.
Yeah.
Just to put things into perspective, like, you have done a lot as far as education goes.
Right, and then I have a science background, even though I switched my major. I was double majored, bio and business. Literally at the last second, I think at the last possible minute that I was able to kind of cut off what my degree was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
I decided against having the science on there, because it would have took me like another, like, I think it was another, they told me it was going to take another like 3 semesters. It was a bit, and I was like, I'm ready to hit the next milestone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chopped that off. So if you're wondering why medicine, it's because that was the goal from the very beginning. But I just got to a point where I needed to hit a milestone so that I can like solidify that all this effort I had been putting forth wasn't for nothing. But then it's literally as soon as I graduated with my business degree, continued in on science. Literally didn't even take a semester off. I started summer classes right after and just kept going with science, and then got to where I did all the prereqs for med school, and then took the MCAT, but then decided to go get my master's. So yeah, I have a bit of a background in education now.
Pause.
What?
I feel like this is a good place to plug in what my educational background is, because I definitely left off on I dropped out and I never came back to what I'm actually...
I've just been a dropout this whole time.
I didn't drop out of school because for me, college is actually very important, and it's just a personal goal that I always wanted to pursue. So I, after dropping out of Sac State, I took a semester off and I went back to pursue a lot of things actually while at Sac City, which is just a our local community college. But I changed my major like 4 times because I originally started off as a bio major, and I realized I didn't want to do biology because I didn't want to go to med school, and I didn't know what careers I would even want to do like in bio. And then I changed to nursing, and nursing was like cool. It was okay. I don't regret any of like the major choices that I chose because it ultimately led me to where I am today. But I realized I had a really intense like hatred for anatomy, not like people, but the subject. Like I absolutely hated taking anatomy and physiology. I was more into like the physiology side, so I was like, I can't imagine having to do this again in nursing school. If you are a nurse that are, you're watching this, or you're a medical professional watching this, my hat goes off to you because that is really, really intense. But, having said that, nursing led me into statistics because you have to take a stat course. And that's where I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do like stats. So I changed my major to public health. And I still kind of realized I don't really want to be in the med field right now. I just don't really see myself like in there. And I had to be brutally honest with myself because as an Asian person, you're like, health field. That's the only thing that, you're destined to go into. But then the more I got into statistics, I started tutoring statistics. And the more I realized I really loved it. I love talking about the subject. And so ultimately I changed my major to applied stat. And so hopefully I'll be attending UC Davis fall of 2021 into their applied stat program. That's kind of where I am right now, is on my way to becoming a statistician, hopefully becoming a data scientist. But the world of statistics is so applicable in a lot of places, so I wouldn't be surprised if I don't end up in data science. That's kind of where I am today. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries. I mean, I think that's important to establish. But I was just saying that, I think that you hit it on the head earlier. There's always something else. Like, you always feel like you're chasing, like, something else, which that's totally fine. Like, I think that that's important for everybody to acknowledge, is that just because you get your education doesn't mean, like, everything's finished from there. Like, I mean, you still have so many things that you're trying to achieve. But with passion, or with, like, chasing these goals or these dreams, you'll recognize how passionate you are about it, because you'll hit milestones where you're like, man, like, I don't think this was for me. Like, we met in anatomy and physiology, and it's like immediately you were like, interesting, but nah. Like,
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I did well in the class, and I think that's the common misconception that people have is, well, if I do really well in these classes, I probably should just go after this, even though I have no interest in like pursuing it whatsoever. That is a roadmap to disaster, because you're just not, I think ultimately you're not going to be happy. No matter how well you do in something, if there isn't some type of like fulfillment, really question whether or not you want to do it because you want to do it or because you're going to succeed. There's no fun in knowing that you're going to succeed in something. Does that make sense?
I definitely know what you mean. But I mean, at the same time, like, one of my things, like, I chose business because, like, I literally was doing business without any effort, and I needed something to offset science. But ultimately, for me, it was fun, even though I knew I was going to succeed in it. But there's always, like, that's my point, though, is that at the end of the day, there's always more to achieve.
Yeah.
And depending on your personality, right? Like, sometimes people are like, yo, I just want to, like, be going, right? Nurses, doctors. Like, there's other fields, too, where, I mean, I've even seen, English majors or people that are into literature write books, and they're, like, turning them out. So, I mean, you just have to know if that's who you are, like, personally.
Innately.
But then there's other people, which, like, I kind of straddle the fence on this, because there's times where I'm just like, go, right? And then there's times where I'm like, I just want to relax. Like, I'll do whatever I need to do so that I can sit down, right? Like, and then that starts to become like my focus, right? Where it's like I'm still passionate about achieving, these things, but I'm trying to achieve these things so that I can do this, I can do X, Y, and Z, right? And so there's always some extra thing, right? Like you get your for me, got your education, and then you're like, wait, but I want to push the bar higher, That was just purely me being selfish. Like I could have just went and got a job and stopped, or I could have just, spent my time studying for my MCATs. Probably should have done more studying, but anyway.
We live and we learn.
But at the end of the day, when you are passionate about something, I feel like that's where you can go, I'm going to go, or I'm going to just pursue this in general, and I'm going to hit these milestones, which may not mean very much to anyone else, but will mean a lot to me. And so, regardless, I think that's kind of what's important, is that you push outside of your comfort zone, but then you choose things that you really enjoy, because that will help fuel you to the next milestone.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like going off that idea of like you're constantly going, when you're passionate about something, constantly going and achieving the next milestone doesn't feel like a chore anymore. If you aren't passionate in what you're doing, it just constantly feels like you're dragging it along and there's no like end point. But when you love what you're doing, you naturally want to keep going. So it doesn't feel like you're obligated to do it. Rather, you feel like you want it just for yourself.
I agree, but then we just experienced this with your finals, right? Where it's like, I get it, you want to keep going, but then you're literally going to drive yourself into the ground. You have to there's a natural breaking point to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And, I tip to people that are early in their education, take breaks. Stop. Like, literally, stop.
Yeah.
Because you can only push so hard, so far before you break. And when you break, it's not going to be pretty. And so instead of even getting to that point, just naturally plan it in there for you so that you can get good rest, so that you can, have proper meals, so that you can take care of yourself and give yourself kind of the nourishment that you need, more than just food wise, but maybe spiritually or whatever you need, instead of going until you drive yourself into the ground. Like that's my thing with business and entrepreneurship, right? I love entrepreneurs. I think they're super cool problem solvers, and they will think about a problem all day, all night. It'll just be on their mind, and I think that's super great. But then for me personally, I'm of the mindset that you think, you do, and then you take a break, and if you get stuck along the way, which most people will, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself a chance to hit that breakthrough without forcing it, right? Like, you can hit many breakthroughs by like stepping away and coming back. But in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about people and minorities in education. I think this is something that isn't taught very well in minority communities. It's either like just nonstop until you get it right, or it's like in my community, I feel like what'll happen is you hit a roadblock, and instead of being like, okay, let's figure out a way around this, it's either like shut down, like a lot of people just shut down, or if they don't shut down, they figure out a way to just avoid it completely. Not fix the problem, not like learn why the roadblock was there in the first place, kind of like how they got to that point, but instead they just like, for a weird example, they turn around and go the opposite way or whatever. They just run from the problem. And so with minorities in education, I feel like there has to be you getting out of that thing, right? And this all goes back to getting out of your comfort zone. If you feel comfortable just being like, I'm just going to force my way through everything, you know, like, I just got to get to being a doctor or whatever. I don't think you'd be very happy.
Yeah.
Push outside of that comfort zone and be like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to relax. Like, this isn't that, I'm not that used to it, but this is what I'm going to do. And also the opposite. When you know, if you hit a roadblock and that's what you know is to run away, take a moment to be like, okay, hold on. Before I run away, you know, let me try and figure this out. Maybe I don't need to run away, you know. And I think that it just all comes down to like pushing outside of your comfort zone and pursuing something that you're passionate about. You know, I think that at the end of the day, you know, if you keep those things in mind, you'll go a lot farther than most people that don't have that in their kind of, you know, in their back pocket to be able to pull out and be like, okay, all right, remember this. This is important.
I think that's really key. And ultimately, the theme of today's episode really sounds like you have to stay true to yourself and look out for yourself before you can go after your goals. And it's important to be honest with yourself and know, you know, are my goals really for me and why do I want them? And I think it seems like two extremes, you know, of like either running away or like driving yourself to the ground, both of which obviously aren't good. But, you know, it's important to develop that sense of self first, be honest with what you really want, and figure out a way to get there, to tangibly get there. And I think that that's a really good cadence for like stopping today's episode. So hopefully, you know, people that are watching, you've derived something that was helpful and beneficial for you and maybe something to consider. And I'm not sure what the next episode is going to be about just yet, but I do hope that you join us for the next one. If you don't, that's okay. I understand. But I do want you to walk away with something. And so I want you to take this question into consideration. You know, think about the last milestone that you hit in your life and think about, is it valuable for you and why was it valuable? And really consider what that might imply. So I hope you enjoyed what we talked about today. If you enjoyed our content, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, all that good stuff, and we will see you next time.